Well, hi there. My name is Clint LOVES. I'm an evolutionary biologist, but I'm also open to the possibility that evolutionary theory is wrong. I mean, it's a model, and while some models are useful, all models are wrong. So, of course, it is to some degree wrong, though also highly useful. But I'm also open to the possibility that it is fundamentally wrong. And one of the most potentially powerful arguments against biological evolution is that of irreducible complexity, which would be a structure or process found in a biological organism that cannot be the result of a series of individual steps that would each provide some benefit, or at the very least, be neutral for the organisms that possess them. I'm just yet to find such a structure or process. But recently, I found this video, so let's watch it together real quick.
Does irreducible complexity show that some biomechanical systems could not evolve gradually, but must have all their parts created at once?
Yes. You see, again, most people are familiar with various natural processes, and let's use photosynthesis as our example. If you remove one component, one event that occurs in the photosynthetic process, it doesn't work. Yet it is responsible for about 98-99% of all life on Earth existing. And therefore, photosynthesis could not have evolved to become what it is over a slow and gradual process. It had to be created whole and complete to function. And the same is true of all other natural processes. Now, we could literally sit down, go through 1 million examples of this in biology, but all natural systems had to come into existence whole and complete or they would not work. Charles Darwin marveled at the human eye and its capabilities, and yet he believed it evolved slowly and gradually. But his critics, even 150 years ago, said, wait a minute, what value would there be to a half-evolved eye for a creature to keep it, supposedly add to it, and still have no benefit from it? It would be a waste of resources.
Okay, so in this case, the speaker begins by talking about photosynthesis. He explains that if you remove one component or one event that occurs in the photosynthetic process, that it doesn't work. And that is true, though what he is saying does reveal a misconception that he has about irreducible complexity that is very common, but I'll address that in a moment. He goes on to say that this means that photosynthesis could not have evolved and had to be created whole and complete. He then says that the same is true of all other natural processes. He says that we could go through literally 1 million examples of this, but he chooses one. The human eye. And the human eye is a remarkable structure. So I'd like to speak for just a minute about the misconception that we saw here, and then I would like to discuss whether or not the camera-style eye, which is what the human eye is indeed irreducibly complex. So the misconception that he expressed here is one that I see very often. In fact, I probably see people with this misconception more often than I see people talking about irreducible complexity without it. Irreducible complexity, the form of irreducible complexity that would actually refute biological evolution, would be a structure or process that cannot be broken down into a series of steps that would each provide some benefit, or at the very least be neutral, for the organisms that possess them. Each step needs to do something that either helps or at the very least does not harm the organisms that have them, or else it could not have evolved. Selection would have eliminated them before they would have ever become what they are today. Finding such a process would at the very least show that that structure or process could not have been the result of biological evolution. As we'll explain here in a moment, Darwin himself laid this out as a clear way to refute his theory. But, and I can see how people who don't really understand evolution at a high level could get this mixed up, this isn't the same as saying that these structures wouldn't be expected to function worse in their current role if component parts were removed. Yes, if I pull the lens out of your eye, it will work way less well as an eye. Potentially, it won't work at all. But does that mean that an eye without a lens cannot work? Well, that's the question that we tackled just a while back in our video about cephalopods, because cephalopods, like humans, have a camera-style eye. So let's watch just a little bit of that. This video is sponsored by our friends at BetterHelp, because no matter where you are in the world, you deserve support. Seasons change, life shifts, and even when things seem fine, anxiety can creep in. Maybe you're feeling pressure to be more social, struggling with big life transitions, or just feeling off for no clear reason. Trust me, you're not alone. BetterHelp is an online therapy platform that connects you with licensed therapists trained to help with anxiety, stress, and more. And the best part? It's all online, so getting help has never been more convenient. Getting started is simple. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, and within a few days, you'll be matched with a therapist that fits your needs. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch anytime at no extra cost. Over 69% of BetterHelp members report feeling an improvement in their anxiety symptoms after just 6 weeks of therapy. So wherever you are, whatever season of life you're in, if anxiety has been holding you back, let BetterHelp help you rule your anxiety so it doesn't rule you. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/ClintsReptiles and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Prioritizing your mental health is so important and shows real courage. If you're facing challenges, you deserve support. The last time we did a sponsorship with BetterHelp, I read a lot in the comments, a lot of questions and concerns that people had about BetterHelp. And one thing that was brought to my attention was that they had offered free therapy services to the people of Israel when violence began in Israel a couple of years ago. And something that happened is I got to dig a little more into that, and I found out that when Israel retaliated against the people of Gaza, BetterHelp didn't hesitate to immediately offer the exact same free therapy to the people of Gaza that were being negatively impacted. And I think that this is really amazing. And it was pretty apparent from talking to you, not many people knew that they had done the same thing for both sides. It's really easy in a conflict like that to pick sides. They didn't. They just saw people suffering and they stepped up to the plate. Thanks for watching, and as always, take care of yourself and each other. Charles Darwin in On the Origin of Species wrote, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." Like any good scientific theory, there must be some means of falsifying it if it is false. And Darwin, right in his most notable work, laying out the strengths of his theory of evolution by means of natural selection, laid out one spectacular way to falsify his theory. A complex structure that could not possibly be reduced down to a series of steps, each of which providing a benefit to the organisms that possess them. A structure that could only provide benefit at or near its current level of complexity. And probably the most commonly cited example of such a structure by those that oppose biological evolution is that of the camera-style eye. Many have claimed that the camera-style eye is irreducibly complex and undermines Darwin's theory completely. But does it? Well, if we look at the camera-style eyes of most cephalopods, we would see multiple very important structures working together to communicate visual information to the brain. Let's start with the photoreceptive cells located at the back of the eye. This is called the retina. And these photoreceptive cells convert light energy into electrical energy that can be transmitted to the brain via the optic nerve. Those cells sit at the back of what is essentially a pot, a nearly complete sphere with a hole at the front that allows in light. And that light is focused onto the photoreceptive cells through a clear round lens that can move forward and backward like the lens of a camera or a telescope to improve the resolution of the object being examined. A highly complex structure that would not function as well if any of these structures were missing. But notice that I didn't say that it wouldn't function at all. Heck, just communicating to the brain that the animal is in darkness or light would convey a clear benefit. There is value in knowing if you are hidden or exposed, whether you're in the shallows or the deep, whether it is day or night, and how long the day and night each last. Any nerves near the surface of an animal that get stimulated when exposed to light would achieve this goal. And there are still plenty of organisms alive today that have such eyes. Heck, the whole bodies of snails are covered in eyes like these. If those light-sensitive photoreceptor cells only become stimulated by specific wavelengths of light, and an organism has 2 or more types of these wavelength-specific cells, then it would even get some information about the color as well as the amount of light present. Sort of like this white plate. if this white plate were photoreceptor cells, and I turned on my flashlight, well, it would communicate to the organism that there's more light or less light, but not the directionality of the light. I would only be able to know what direction the light came from if I had photoreceptors like this on multiple sides of my body. And this is what you tend to see on organisms with such eyes, like, well, snails that we mentioned earlier, or jellyfish. But if those light-sensitive cells are located on the surface of a pit, the shape of a bowl, like this bowl, then a single patch of photoreceptors can collect information not only about the presence or absence of light, not only about the intensity of the light, not only the color of the light, but the direction from which the light is coming, which is very valuable for locating and reacting to other objects in your environment. Many living organisms, including mollusks like limpets and chitons, have cup-shaped eyes just like this, and they're doing great. But they can't see images clearly at all. The light bouncing off of any object enters the cup from many slightly different angles. This is a bank of enclosure. They're well illuminated, and this room is otherwise dark. Most of the light present in the room right now is being emitted by what is reflecting off of these enclosures. But you'll notice, if I look at my plate or my bowl, I don't see an image of the enclosures. I just see some light, relatively uniform all over them. And the reason for this is because when light bounces off of an object, it spreads out. It refracts in many different directions. And so from every point on that enclosure, the light is heading off in a whole bunch of different directions and hitting the plate, and I'm just getting a bunch of noise. With my plate, it's just light. With my bowl, well, it's light with direction. And that's all I get. That is, unless I shrink down the amount of light that I allow to hit the plate or the bowl to a single point. By doing so, I only get the light from a very small number of refracted angles. The smaller the hole, the fewer the angles. If there is light bouncing off of an object on the right side of my bowl, it will pass through the pinhole and hit a small region on the left side of my bowl. Light travels in straight lines unless it is refracted by an object. Now, instead of getting that light from all of the angles that is refracted by this object, for every point on the object, I get a single point of light on my bowl, but on the opposite side of my bowl. Light coming from the left side hits the right side of the bowl. Light coming from the right hits the left side. From the top hits the bottom. From the bottom hits the top. And for each reflective part of an object, I get a corresponding point of information projected upside down and backwards onto my bowl or onto my plate. Suddenly, I have a somewhat high-resolution image of the object reflecting the light projected onto my bowl. It isn't just light or dark. It isn't just intensity. It isn't just general directionality, but it is an image. This is how a camera obscura or a pinhole camera works. Okay, so that's how a pinhole camera works, but I'll be honest, seems a little bit hard to believe that you're actually going to end up with an image just because you constrict down the aperture to a single pinhole. So I had to make one, and I had to make one in a way that we could also observe the image on the inside. If you put a piece of film back there, that's one way to do it, but I came up with another way. So here's what I built. I didn't want to buy anything new. So what did I have? I had some trays from some Panda Express. I had a box, some electrical tape, and some Clint's Reptile Room shirts, which are stinking rad. Okay, and what I did is I took a piece of paper. These are our photoreceptive cells, right? It'd be even better if it's a bowl because then we get directionality, but it's going to be a little easier right now if I just use a piece of paper. So there's a piece of white paper back there. I taped up the box so that all of the only place that light will be coming in will be through this hole. Now I drilled a large hole here, and then I also put on a small card so I could change the size of this pinhole because I wanted to learn what happens when I change the size of the pinhole. And then I put also another large hole here, which actually destroys this as a pinhole camera unless you're looking in the hole. If you are looking in the hole, or if you have a camera pointed in the hole, then suddenly it becomes a pinhole camera and we can see what's going on inside. But the first thing I need to do is I need to install this
here in the front, and I need to make sure that no light is going to get around it. That's what the shirts are for. So let's get building. Just like that, we're ready to see what this looks like through a pinhole camera. All right, so we've got most of the lights off here in the room so that this bookshelf reptile enclosure is the most illuminated thing around. This is one of the things for a pinhole camera that's really going to matter, is that your object is brighter than the surroundings. And so this is what it looks like from our camera. Here's our camera. And now, as I approach the camera, what you're going to see is we're going to cover that hole and you will be able to see what is being projected on the paper. Are you ready? Let's see here. Wow. We've increased the size of our aperture, which is this hole here, to a little bit bigger. This is still our viewing hole. And so now we will see what the image looks like if we expand the size of the aperture just a little bit to not quite so much of a pinhole. And you notice that? We've got an image. It's brighter this time, but a little bit blurrier, because the less of a pinhole we have, the more extraneous light that it lets in, the blurrier the image, but the brighter the image. But what we do have is an image. Not just light or dark, not just direction of the light, but an actual picture. Okay, so we have already seen that the larger the hole, the brighter the image, but the blurrier the image. And if I made the hole like the size of my fist, so that I could see it really clearly, we had to use special settings on our cameras in order to be able to see that image at all, because it is so dim in there. But if I opened it up really wide, it would let in so much light interference that I wouldn't have an image at all. However, if I introduce a lens into the equation, it changes everything. Watch this. I'll open up my aperture all the way. Obviously, I get a crisper image if I close it a little bit, but I'm now going to introduce a lens into the equation. And if I get the distance just right, I can get a highly focused image, even with my aperture open wide. It's still upside down. It's still inverted, but it's an actual image. And by moving the lens back and forth, that's how I bring it into focus.
Well, this is also how the eye of the Nautilus works. It is essentially a bowl-shaped pinhole camera. And, like all of the other simpler versions of eyes, it works. But like you probably noticed, when I used the bigger hole, more light came through. But it also allowed in more angles of extraneous light. So my image got brighter, but it became less crisp, blurrier. So if you notice, the pupil of a natilid is pretty much always really small. They can't let in much light because the image that they will see will become extremely low resolution if they do. But if I put a lens between the hole and the bowl or the plate and get the distance just right, I can focus the image. And when it comes to visual acuity, placing a lens between the pinhole and the photoreceptors would result in a much better eye. An eye that could dilate much wider, allowing much more light without losing resolution. And that is the type of eye that we see in the remaining cephalopods, the clade Coleoidea. Every week we have an entire extra video just for our Stinkin' Rad fans at Patreon. And I gotta tell you, the one for this week is next level. It's not that uncommon when we do videos of this format, but it is a heck of a discussion, and we talk about relevant subjects to this video, but I think a lot of you will be very interested in that. So if you'd like to see that video and all of the other videos we have from the past, or some of the other amazing features we have for our patrons, or if you just want to help support us making content like this in the future, please consider checking out our Patreon. Okay, so it is true that if you remove any of the major components of a human eye, or a cephalopod eye, that eye will cease to function in its current capacity very well. But is it impossible for these steps, each one of them, to have conferred a benefit to the organism that possessed them? I think the answer is clearly yes. And the nice thing about examining this question in mollusks is that not only could such structures have hypothetically conferred a benefit, but you find these structures, each of these steps, existing and functioning perfectly well in extant living mollusks. Eyes don't fossilize very well, so it may be difficult to ever confirm or reject that this is what happened in the early ancestors of modern vertebrates. But it is clearly true that the camera-style eye could have evolved in a series of steps. We don't know for sure that this is what happened, but we do know enough to say with great confidence that the camera-style eye is not irreducibly complex. And if you want to know more about cephalopods, I recommend that you check out this video right now. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. I've got countless numbers of planets. Life starts however life starts, which is outside of evolution a little bit, but I'm there too, right? Maybe life can spontaneously start without any supernatural interference. Maybe there is supernatural interference every time life begins. Okay, so now I've got life. I've got life all over the universe, and more than one universe. And I just need humans to happen somewhere. Right, in essentially infinite time, as far as I'm concerned. How much do I need to get involved? I mean, like, if I've learned anything from Star Trek, like, humans are happening all over the place, with only very minor differences, and they can interbreed.
Yes. Well, it's the there was an alien species that created all of them, right?
Yeah, I think they dealt with that by they seeded
the founders, or what do they call them? Something like that.
Yeah. But
They release their gametes into the wind like any good tree.
Mm-hmm.